Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi yassir wa la tuassir wa tammim bil khair. Here is the conjugation of past tense, isnadu dhahaba. And the reason why I wanted to show you is like we are dealing with the verbal sentence, and we want to make sure that what is meant by form number 1 and what is meant by form number 4. So I would strongly recommend that you memorize this conjugation. And today, inshallah, towards the end of the lesson, we will have lots of verbs. And inshallah, I would expect from you to make the conjugation of all the verbs that we are going to learn in this lesson. Every past tense would have the same conjugation, whether we have 100, 200, or 500, or exactly like almost 1000 verbs are used in the Quran. So the past tense will be on the same pattern. So we can see here that for the third person, al-ghaib is called the third person. And the verb in Arabic language always starts with third person masculine singular. Third person masculine singular. So we have dhahaba, dhahaba, dhahabu, dhahabat. So if you look at form number 1 and form number 4, which I clearly explained that whenever we have a verbal sentence, and if the doer is apparent, then for the masculine, the verbal sentence will start with form number 1. And for the feminine, the verbal sentence will start with form number 4. And the conjugation continues, dhahabat, dhahabata. And then when we reach form number 6, here the track number 1 will complete. So from here, we will get into track number 2. What does that mean? That means, for example, here we have all the 3 letters in the beginning, they are active. Dhahaba, dhahaba, dhahabu, dhahabat. And here, dhahabata. So it should be dhahabata, right? But when you reach from number 6, now you can see that the third letter becomes sakin. It becomes sakin, so it becomes dhahabana. And then from this onwards up to from number 14, it will continue on the same pattern. So when we talk about the second person, al-mukhatab, it will be dhahabat, dhahabata, dhahabana. And for the feminine, it will be dhahabti, dhahabtuma, dhahabta, dhahabtuma, dhahabtum, dhahabti, dhahabtuma, dhahabtunna. And for the masculine and for the feminine, first person, al-mutakallim, it will be dhahabtu and dhahabana. Now, I'm sure, inshallah, the idea of form number 1 and form number 4 is clear. And based on this, now we can move on and learn about this. In the previous lesson, there were like a couple of mistakes in this slide. So I thought we could do it again. So here we have nominal sentence, al-jumlatul ismiyatu, and here we have verbal sentence, al-jumlatul fi'liyah. We know that jumla ismiya, the nominal sentence, always starts with the noun. And if the subject is noun and the predicate is verb, then the verb has to follow the noun. Verb has to follow the noun. For example, talib is 1. So we will use the conjugation past tense and we will use dhahaba. And if we have talibani, 2 students, so we have to use the past tense conjugation dhahaba. And if we have at-tullabu, we will say dhahabu. So if the sentence starts with the noun and the predicate is a verbal sentence, then the verb has to follow the noun. The verb has to follow the noun. However, when we talk about jumla fi'liya, the case is different. What's the case? Here, when the doer is apparent, for example, at-talibu, so talib is masculine, so it has to start with form number 1. Now, inshallah, I'm sure that it's clear that form number 1, I will show you again. This is form number 1. So it will start with dhahaba, right? And then dhahaba talibu. And even if we have 2 students, still we will start with the verb dhahaba talibani. And if we have more than 2 students, it will be dhahaba tullabu. So basic difference between nominal sentence and verbal sentence is that in nominal sentence, the verb has to follow the noun. But in verbal sentence, when the doer is apparent, whether the doer is singular or whether the doer is dual or it is the plural, the verb has to be used is only first person. For the third person, masculine singular, that is dhahaba. And the same goes with the feminine, الطالبة. So we will have to use ذهبت, and الطالبتان ذهبتا, and الطالبات ذهبنا. Now we can see here that the verb is following the noun. But when we talk about the verbal sentence, form number 4 has to be used, and the form number 4 is ذهبت, as we can see here. So ذهبت الطالبة, and if there are 2 students, we will say ذهبت الطالبتان, and then if we have more than 2 students, we will say ذهبت الطالبات. So the verbal sentence, when the doer is a parent, for the masculine, it starts with ذهب, yani that's the first form of the verb, and for the feminine, it starts with ذهبت, that is the fourth form of the verb. Inshallah, I hope it's clear now. قدم الفعل. قدم يقدم تقديما, that means to bring forward. علمت نفس ما قدمت. So to whatever you have sent forward or whatever you have brought forward. So قدم الفعل, we have to bring the فعل, يعني the verb, forward. في الجمل الآتية, in the following sentences. كما, as, هو, it is. موضح, explained. في المثال, in the example. So basically, this is the word by word translation, and the literal translation will be change each of the following nominal sentence into verbal sentence, as shown in the example. Look at the example. Al-awladu sharibu al-qahwata. Now, as I explained earlier, that if it's a nominal sentence, and then the verb has to follow the noun. Al-awladu is plural, and the verb has to be plural. So it will be al-awladu sharibul qahwata. But when we have a verbal sentence, then it has to start with the singular verb, which is shariba. So it will be sharib al-awladu al-qahwata. And the boys drank coffee. So now on the same pattern, we have to complete the rest of the sentences. An-nasu sami'u al-adhana. Now we can see that it's a nominal sentence. It starts with the noun. An-nas is the plural. That's why the verb that we are using is also plural. So sami'u al-adhana, the people heard the adhan. And now what we have to do? Ahsanti ya ukhtah. Now it will be sami an-nasu al-adhana, right? So it will be sami an-nasu al-adhana. Al-adhan will be as it is over here. So now the verb will be used only, the singular verb. Next is at-tullabu katabul ajwibata. The students wrote the answers. Now you want to say students wrote the answer in a verbal sentence. So we will say katabat tullabu al-ajwibata. Excellent. The students wrote the answers. Next is at-talibatu dakhalna al-fasla. At-talibatu is the plural. That's why the verb has to be the plural. But for the feminine, we will say dakhalat, right? Dakhalat, right? So we will say dakhalat, and dakhalat at-talibatu al-fasla. The feminine students entered the classroom. Al-mudarrisuna kharaju min al-fusuli. The teachers went out of the classrooms. This is a nominal sentence. Now we want to change it into a verbal sentence. So we will say kharaj al-mudarrisuna min al-fusuli. Kharaj al-mudarrisuna min al-fusuli. The students went out of the classrooms. Zumala'i raja'u min Makkah. My classmates returned from Makkah. Now you want to change it into a verbal sentence. So you will say raja'a zumala'i min Makkah. Excellent. So raja'a. So we have to use the verb in the beginning of the sentence because it's a verbal sentence. Akhawati ghasalna al-qumsana. My sisters washed the shirts. Now it's the feminine, so we have to use ghasalat, right? Ghasalat akhawati al-qumsana. My sisters washed the shirts. At-tujjaru fatahad dakakina. The merchants opened the shops. Now we can see that the verb is following the noun, but when we have a verbal sentence, we will say fatahat tujjaru ad-dakakina, right? Fatahat tujjaru ad-dakakina. Sorry, this one, yeah. So the merchants opened the shops. At-tabibatu dhahabna ila al-mustashfa. The female doctors went to the hospital. So we will say dhahabat at-talibatu. ذهبت الطبيبات إلى المستشفى. ذهبت الطبيبات إلى المستشفى. The doctors went to the hospital. الطلاب الطلاب فهموا الدرس. The students understood the lesson. So we will say فهم الطلاب الدرس. And أظن إن شاء الله I hope that you also understood the lesson. So now I'm sure inshallah the difference between the nominal sentence and the verbal sentence is very clear now. Here the verb is following the noun, all of the sentences, but if you see over here the verbal sentence only starts with the first form of the verb when it is the masculine, the doer is masculine, and when the doer is feminine, then it has to start with the feminine form of the verb. تأمل الأمثلة الآتية. You have to reflect on the following examples. خرج الطلاب وذهبوا. Now, the first part of the sentence is a verbal sentence. خرج الطلاب, the students went. So this is the verbal sentence. However, as I explained clearly, that when we have a noun first, then the verb has to follow the noun. So we will say خرج الطلاب وذهبوا, and they went. And you can also say الطلاب ذهبوا, so it will become another sentence. So خرج الطلاب will be a verbal sentence, and الطلاب ذهبوا will be a nominal sentence. Similarly, قرأ الطلاب وكتبوا. The students read and wrote. So قرأ الطلاب is a verbal sentence, and when we have a noun which is the plural, then the verb also has to be for the plural. أكل الناس وشربوا. The people ate and drank. The same thing over here. الناس is plural. That's why the verb that follows it has to be plural as well. كون جملا مثل هذه. Now we have to make the sentences like this. مستعملا, by using الفعلين الواردين, two following verbs. في كل تمرين, in each of the exercises. ومستعينا, and by seeking help. بالكلمات, with the words. التي, which are بين قوسين, in the brackets. So we have to make sentence from each pair of verbs on the pattern of the examples. And note that the second verb has the plural ending while the first does not. All right, so of course when we say دخلت طلاب, the students entered, and after that we will say وجلسوا, right? وجلسوا. So we will say دخل الطلاب طلاب الفصل وجلسوا. The students entered the classroom and they sat. So here دخل الطلاب, the sentence is a verbal sentence. It starts with the verb, so that's why it has to be دخل. And when we want to use the verb after the noun, then the verb will follow the noun. The noun is plural. That's why the verb that we are using also has to be plural. Yes, the next one. What should be the next sentence? ضرب الأولاد الحية وقتلوها. ضرب الأولاد الحية وقتلوها. The boys killed the snake. No, the boys hit the snake and killed it. ضرب الأولاد الحية وقتلوها. Now قتلوا, after that ha will be the attached pronoun and ha will be the object. So here ضرب is the verb, al-awlad is the subject, and al-hiyata is the object. Wa and qatalu, they killed. Ha refers to the attached pronoun, to the snake, which is the attached pronoun. And we have learned that the attached pronoun is always used as an object in a verbal sentence. The next one will be قرأ الطلاب الدرس وفهموه. قرأ الطلاب الدرس, the students read the lesson. وفهموه, and they understood it. And who refers to the lesson. So here we have a verbal sentence that starts with قرأ, verb, subject, object, and فهموا, subject, verb, and who will be the object. Next is سمع الناس الأذان وذهبوا إلى المسجد. The people heard the adhan and they went to the masjid. سمع الناس الأذان وذهبوا إلى المسجد. So we can see over here verb, subject, and object. And here we have dhahabu is the verb plus the subject. Ila al-masjidi, and the people went to masjid. Kawin, make, jumalan, sentence, musta'milan, by using al-kalimat al-atiyati, the following words. Now we have to use each of the following verbs in the sentences. Akala means he ate. Ghasala means he washed. Or we can also say to eat and to wash. But the reason why we say he ate and he washed, because we know the first form of the verb consists of the hidden doer, which is he. Qara'a, he read. Kataba, he wrote. Daraba, he hit. Qatala, he killed. Dakhala, he entered. Kharaja, he went out. Hafidha, he memorized. Shariba, he drank. Fahima, he understood. And Samia, he heard. Now we can see that the first letter and the last letter, they are mabniyun al-fath. However, the second letter, the haraka changes. Sometimes it is fatha and sometimes it is kasra. Sometimes it can be dhamma, but that is very rare. Now you have these verbs bayna yadaykum, in front of you. Now what you have to do is to make the sentences. That's number one. And number two, if you get the chance, try to do the conjugation of each of the verbs. And inshallah, once you do the conjugation, and then you will become very fluent in the verbs. So like I showed you in the beginning of the lesson, dhahaba, based on the same pattern. For example, akala, akala, akalu, akalat, akalata, akalna, up to akaltu, akalna. Similarly, sami'a, sami'a, sami'u. Now you can do the conjugations. I've got the answers for you over here. These are the answers that are already over there. And if you want to make your own sentences, you can definitely make your own sentences. For example, Mada akalta ya Bilalu, what did you eat, O Bilal? So now it's not necessary that we have to use only akala. You can use any past tense form. For example, akaltu, akalna, akalat, akalta. You can use any of them. غسل الولد السيارة, the boy washed the car. قرأ الطلاب الدرس, the students read the lesson. من كتب هذه الآية على السبورة, who wrote this verse on the board. من ضرب هذا الطفل, who hit this boy. أبالحجر قتلت الحية يا إبراهيم, did you kill the snake with the stone, O Ibrahim? دخل الناس المسجد, the people entered the masjid. خرج الإمام من المسجد بعد الصلاة, the imam left the masjid after the prayer. أي سورة حفظت يا أباس, which surah did you memorize, O Abbas? And أي is mansub because it is maf'ul bihi of حفظت. Then we have متى شربت القهوة يا علي, when did you drink coffee, O Ali? من فهم هذا الدرس? نعم, من فهم هذا الدرس? Yes, who understood this lesson? كلكم إن شاء الله. كلكم فهمتم الدرس أم لا؟ ما سمعت الأذان, I didn't hear the adhan. Alhamdulillah, okay. تأمل ما يلي, it is a very, very important point over here. I explained it in the beginning of the lesson. And من فتح الباب, who opened the door. And here we have verb plus we have subject and we have the object. من فتح الباب. And you say أنا فتحته, I opened it. So when you say فتحته, so فتحته is what? It is verb plus subject. And where is the object? The attached pronoun, as I explained several times, is always used as an object. So who will be the object? Similarly, من فتح النوافذ, who opened the windows? أنا فتحتها, I opened them. Ha refers to the windows. And النوافذ. So فتحت will be the verb plus subject, and ha will be the attached pronoun. Now it's not only restricted to who and ha. We know that all the attached pronouns can be used with the verbs. For example, فتحته, فتحتهما, فتحتهم, whatever it is. فتحتها and فتحتهن. Now it's up to you. You can do the conjugation. Sometimes you can do the conjugation only for the sake of conjugation, even if it doesn't make any sense because you want to learn. Now, how many sentences can you make? Alhamdulillah, if you want to practice now you can do the conjugation of each verb, 14 conjugations of each verb plus 14 attached pronouns to one verb. So if you want, you can make hundreds of sentences from these verbs. Al-kalimatu al-jadidatu, the new words. Al-inabu, grapes. Al-mawzu, banana. At-tinu, fig. Al-fajru, fajr time, the morning time. Jawabun, and the plural is ajwibatun, on the pattern of af'ilatun, answer and answers. Su'alun, question, and the pattern is on the and the plural is on the pattern of af'ilatun, so it will be as'ilatun. Al-baqqalu, the grocer. Al-asa, the stick. Hiyatun, snake, and the plural is hiyatun. Samia, he heard. Fahima, he understood. And shariba, he drank. So alhamdulillah, now you can see that this lesson was very useful. It's not finished yet. We will inshallah do some of the examples from the Quran as well. But as of now, inshallah, I'm sure that you have got a very clear idea of the verbal sentence. Now let's look at some of the examples from the Quran. So I have taken this surah from the Quran, Surah Ar-Rahman. So it starts with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Ar-Rahman, generally we stop, so that's why we say Ar-Rahman, so it will be Ar-Rahmanu Allama al-Qur'ana. So the reason why I had to bring it over here, because now it's understood that it refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the translators, they did not put he over here. However, here Allama, we have the inbuilt doer, which of course refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allama will be, so it will be what? It will be verb plus subject. It will be verb plus subject, right? Allama, and al-Qur'ana will be the object, as we can see over here. Similarly, the next verse, خلق الإنسان, again we can see that he created man. So now we can see over here that khalaqa, we have verb plus we have subject, fail plus file, and al-insana is the object, and that's why it is mansub here. Similarly, al-Qur'ana is the object, and that's why it is mansub. Allamahul bayan, allama is a verb that generally requires two objects. So we will say al-maf'ul al-awwal will be who, and al-maf'ul al-thani will be al-bayan. We have learned that the attached pronoun is always used as the object. So this is object number 1, and this is object number 2. Sometimes a verb requires to have two objects, and allama is one of them. For example, in English, we say, give me a pen, give me a book. So give me, a'tini, also has two objects, me and the pen. So similarly, allama also requires two objects. Not always, but whenever it requires, we can have two objects as well. So allamahul bayana, and taught him speech. And then we have, if you continue and then we skip some verses, and then we have was-samaa rafa'aha. So rafa'a will be, yes, verb plus subject, and ha will be the object pronoun, so it will be the object. So it refers to the as-sama. Wa wada'a is also the past tense, so it will be verb plus subject, and al-mizana will be the object. Wa wada'a al-mizan. So now when we memorize the Quran, or when we are listening to the recitation, sometimes when we listen, the Sheikh stops on every verse of the Quran, so we don't really know the case endings. But now, alhamdulillah, you know the language, so memorization of the Quran, inshallah, will become much easier for you. And now you know how the ending will come. So here we have the references, verse 55, and then, sorry, surah number 55, Ar-Rahman, and then we have verse 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7. Here we have وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ. So here we have a typical verbal sentence where we have qatala is the verb, Dawood alayhi salam will be the subject, and Jalut will be the object. So it consists of verb, subject, and object. And we know that the subject is marfu and the object is mansub. And David killed Goliath. So we can see over here verb. Sorry. So in English, generally the sentence starts with the subject, right? So in English we have subject, we have verb, and here we have the object. But in Arabic it's different. Qatala, no, now we don't have inbuilt. We will have only the inbuilt if you don't have the doer. Now the doer is here. When the doer is there, then qatala only means killed. It only means killed. Who killed? Dawood alayhi salam. So we will say qatala Dawudu Jaluta. For example, you say dhahaba, he went. So when you say dhahaba, it means he went. But when you say dhahaba Bilalun, then what does that mean? Bilal, he went? Of course not. It means Bilal went. So whenever the doer appears, then the verb will be translated only as the verb, and the inbuilt doer will disappear because the apparent doer comes outside. Now the doer has come outside, so that's why we will say qatala is the verb, Dawood alayhi salam is the subject, and Jalut is the object. I hope it's clear now, inshallah. In the previous verses, you might be thinking here, yes, there is inbuilt doer, because after allama, you can see the noun is mansub. So if the noun is mansub, that means the doer is inbuilt. But when the noun is outside, that means the doer is here, and then the next one is the object. Qala rajulani. Now you can see over here rajulun, and the dual of rajulun is rajulani, but the verb that is being used is for the singular, because this is the most important rule of the verbal sentence, that when the doer is apparent, then the verbal sentence will start only with form number 1 or form number 4. So qala rajulani min alladhina yakhafuna an'ama Allahu alayhima. The rest of the verses, inshallah, we will analyze when we proceed further into the course. But as of now, our focus is on the beginning of the sentence and the doer of the sentence. So qala will be the verb, and rajulani will be the doer, will be the subject. إِذْ هَمَّتْ طَائِفَتَانِ مِنْكُمْ أَن تَفْشَلَا. Now we can see here that hammat is the past tense and it is used for the feminine. Yes, and ta'ifatani is the dual. Ta'ifatun is singular and ta'ifatani is the dual. However, the doer is apparent, it is outside. So that's why for the feminine, now it's clear from the Quran, because we have to learn everything from the Quran. So if the doer is feminine, then the verbal sentence has to start with the fourth form of the verb, which I explained in the beginning of the lesson. So it is hammat ta'ifatani minkum an tafshala. And then the last one is qad aflaha al-mu'minun. Now aflaha is used for the past tense. Aflaha means he succeeded. But when we say aflaha al-mu'minuna, then he disappears, and it means the believers succeeded. And now we can see that aflaha is from number 1, and the doer, the subject, is the plural, which we have learned that if the doer is apparent, it can be singular, it can be dual, and it can be plural. Certainly will the believers have succeeded. Nas'alullaha an yaj'alana minhum. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them. So alhamdulillah, our lesson is complete now. I hope, inshallah, that the idea about the verbal sentence and the difference between the verbal sentence and the nominal sentence is clear now. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.